database-driven habit tracker in Notion. Welcome! We're in week 6, day 38 of our journey of learning Notion in 100 days. Today we're going to create a long-term habit tracker based on a database. And if you look in the description, if you just want to go directly to the results, you can click on a link to get a hold of a template that copies the results exactly. Or just follow along and build it yourself. In week 4, we created a long-term habit tracker using terrible technology. Today, we're revisiting that habit tracker and making it database-driven with great tech instead. Let's dive in. First, we'll create a container page for everything here. Database-driven habit tracker. And since we already know what goal we have here, let's quickly copy what we produced in week 4 here as a template. To get the long-term habit tracker we built in week 4, we'll simply go to the sidebar. We'll navigate down to the long-term habit tracker. We'll click the 3-dot menu. We'll click duplicate. And after a while, Notion will duplicate that page and we can simply drag and drop it into our current page, making it a sub-page of this one. Let's click in and look where we left off. We have a little list going here. We can see that we have a long list of days where we tracked our habits. If you remember, the kind of problem here is that it's very hard to work with this page. You don't really have real checkboxes. These are just emojis, and the reason for that is that we used a standard table rather than a database table. One quick thing you can do is to click the menu for the table and turn into database. And that will immediately turn the table into a database instead. So let's do that and see what we ended up with. So we have our title column, we have our habits on the axis here, we have rise at 6 a.m., we have meditate, we have breakfast, we have workout, and we have bed. We now have a database, but honestly, we didn't really improve much. It's still the same emojis here. Let's change this around a little bit, and since we already have the structure done here, we'll actually continue building on this. So we go to the rise at 6 a.m., we go to edit property, we change the type from text to a checkbox. And as you can see, no data was saved here. It doesn't matter, we're building a new template here, so we don't really care about the data, but we can see that now we have a much more convenient way of actually working with the habit tracker. We do the same for the rest of the columns. Fantastic, now we have the structure we're looking for here. So that's great. Let's remove some of the extra information here. So we just keep what we need. We do a square selection and we simply press the delete key. Since we're in January, let's start with January 1. As we know, this is now a database. We can create templates if we want. So if we wanted to have some specific content here, maybe we want to track how did I feel today, any notes, maybe we want to combine this with a journal. We can certainly do that with a template. I'll link a previous video regarding database templates above if you're interested. For now, let's work with what we have here. Let's create a few days here first. As we know, pressing enter on the last row doesn't do much, so we press shift enter. Now we can start filling in our habits, which is great. And another simple thing we can do, since it's now a database, is that we can start counting here. So we know that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 habits, and we can see how we're doing. So we're creating a formula. We edit the formula, and now it's a little bit interesting here. So we have our checkboxes. They show up as properties in the list of properties here. I can of course start with something simple. So I say just the first property plus the second property. And as you can see, Notion gets a little bit angry here. Type mismatch prop rise at 6 a.m. is not a text. And as you can see, it also replicated the visual text box rather than taking some kind of value for it. Okay, so we realize we need to convert the property in some way. So how do we do that? Well, there are a few ways to do this. So if we go down to the operators here, we have a few different ones we can choose from. If we look at the functions, we have a few different to work with here, and we see one that is called toNumber, which looks interesting. We choose toNumber and we say rise at 6 a.m. and we see what Notion puts out here. Okay, great. So we see that we get a 1 for each where rise at 6 a.m. is checked and a 0 for the others. So if we click here, you can see that it changes. Great. So then we simply do the same thing here. So for simplicity, I'm going to copy this toNumber and we click the meditate one and we say toNumber breakfast, and we say toNumber workout, and we say toNumber bed. Great. So now we can see how many we completed here. That's good. Let's call it something better than formula. So we can call it habits completed. There are a few different ways of doing this now. So we could, of course, say that, all right, let's just take all of this and divide by 5, and we get a value. We can say times 100 to get percentage completed, and we're quite happy with that. But I actually think that it's a bit cleaner to use Notion's built-in formatting options. So we go to Edit, and we say that we want a bar or a ring. I'm thinking that a bar is quite good here. We use green, and you see it only fills the slightest little part here. And why is that? Well, it's because it says divide by 100. So since we know 5 is the maximum, we say divide by 5 instead. And we get this nice bar visualization. We can select if we want to show the number or only show the bar. And we can also format it as a ring in a similar manner. But I think we stay with the bar, and I think we delete the number for now. So now we have the habits completed. So this is nice, but I'm thinking that we would like a percent completed as well. So I go and I create a new formula column. We simply reference the old one in the formula. So we look at the habits completed and we divide it by 5. We say done. We set the number format to %. All of a sudden we have our percent completed column. You might wonder what you can do with the percent column. Well, you can do the exact same thing. So let's choose a ring here, and it automatically assumes that 100% is max. So that's great. All right. So now we're starting to see a little bit of the flexibility with a database here. Let's take it one step further. We'll call this habits database just to keep track of it. We'll hide the title. Okay. What we're missing here is really a date. As you can see, we need to write the date here all the time. The way to do this is to create a new date property. All right, let's see. The first one is January 1st. Second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. Okay, so that's good. What happens if we create a new one? Not much. So this is one option. The other option is to turn on the created time. What happens now is that Notion will show us exactly when each was created. So this was created January 11. If you're really meticulous, you can do it this way and you'll be fine. If you look back in our recurring tasks video, you can see that you can combine a manual column with an auto-generated one if you want to do that. But let's hide this one for now and continue with the date one. What you actually can do here is that you can create a new template. And what we're interested here with this template is this date property. And the unfortunate thing here is that, as you can see, there isn't really any today options. If you set today's date here and you say this new habit day, so we can distinguish it, we go back, we create a new one and we say new habit day, and then we create a new one and we say new habit day. Great. We can see that both these got created with January 11th. So that's not fantastic. Let's see if we can fix that. We'll go into the new habit day template we go edit and we clear this one. Great, let's try again. New habit day. All right, so we have our table and we have a few habits, and this new habit day seems a little bit annoying, and we also don't really get any automatic days. As we know, we can create a date, or actually that already exists in Notion behind the scenes, but we can add it as a property, and we can just scroll down and say created time to see that date and time created. But I have fun little workaround around this. So you can see now that we have dates for this column set for January 1 through 6. We have an empty one here and an empty one here. So what we can do is that we go to filter, we say filter date, and we press date is not empty. And what happens now is exactly what we expect it to do, meaning that it hides all the entries where date is empty. But the interesting thing is that with this filter active for the database, when we create a new entry, the date property is auto-populated. And this is due to the date filter here being treated as a forcing function, similar to when you have a view and you create something inside that view. So since this is forcing the date to not be empty, Notion needs to guess what we want, and it correctly guesses that we want to add today's date as the date. The fantastic thing about this is that we can change it if we were a little bit late with our entry, and we can also clear it, and then it is removed from the view as expected. When we remove the filter, we see all these empty ones. Let's delete those. We can actually delete everything here we don't need anymore. We delete those, and we delete these 4 up top. We create a new one, and we see we have no date. We undo that and add our date filter again. Filter for date, and date is not empty. Great. We create a new one. We see that the date is filled here. You don't get anything in the title, of course. Doesn't matter. We can fill it exactly as we want, and we have the date filter here. So that's great. What happens if we want to add some extra information here? Well, what we can do is create a new template. We call it new habit day, and we have all these properties. We can of course move them around as we please. They are a little bit strangely organized right now, right? And if we want, we can set default for these. We don't want to do that, but maybe we want to create a nice title. So let's create a heading 1, and we say habits for day. And how do you do this? Well, there is a little shortcut. You can write at today, and nowadays Notion will give us 2 options, date when duplicated and the actual today date. So we say date when duplicated, and we now have a nice little title. We can go red here for a red background, which is nice. All right, so we go back. We now have the default empty page template, and we have the new habit day. So nothing changes when we press new here. And when we go in, it looks exactly as expected. But if we go to the new habit day template, it works as expected. We get the new habit day, but the date is unfortunately empty. So we need to pick this again. So we kind of got a degradation there. And as you saw, it creates the content for the template. It says at today, which looks a little bit strange, but you can change this if you want to date format, and let's say you want year, date, month, for example. If you don't make this change, it will say today, yesterday, and then after a while you will start getting the absolute date either way. So this will kind of solve itself over time, this issue. Okay, as we saw, we didn't get the date automatically. So to make that happen, what we actually need to do is go to the new habit day, and we set it as default For all views, only the table view or cancel. Okay, so we set for all views. And if we now do the same thing, we get the same result. That's fantastic. But if we instead click the new button, since we have a forcing function here, we get a date, which is today's date, a good guess from Notion. When we save this, you saw that we both got the title, we got our little content here, and of course we could fill this with more things we want to track in our habit tracker. Nice! The last thing here that we might want to do is to look into the title. So what happened with this today thing? Can we do the same thing here? Okay, that worked. That's nice. Can we do the same thing for the template? Let's try it. Go into the template, and instead of new habit day, we simply set the title as today and select date when duplicated. Great. For some reason, it's not possible to change the format when we're in the template. It doesn't work for any of these, but whenever we use it, we can actually change it. So if we go here, we can now set date format and time zone, and we can set it back to year, month, day. As we said, if we set an old date, so maybe we can try that. So we create a new one again. We changed this from today to something a few weeks ago, and then you see it automatically changes the format. To me, this is just a bit of a nice have that we duplicate the same thing for the title column. I typically just move it out of the way. You can hide other columns, but you can't really hide the title column, so you move it out of the way. Of course, I also want to move the date column, so it's the first one here. We remove the redundant dates for now. The final thing one might want to do, as you can see, it got a little bit spread out now. Everything works as expected, but if we minimize them like this, it gets compact, but it's kind of hard to know which is which here. So if we go back out, there is a new little feature in Notion which is quite nice. You can go into each property, you can click the little checkbox, and you can set a new icon here. We pick a sunrise for the first column. We can pick a temple for the meditation one. Pick this one. For breakfast, food, coffee icon is a nice one. For workout, gym icon. And for bed, we simply use the sunset icon. All right, now when we collapse these, we just have the checkbox columns, but we can actually, using the icon, decipher which habit we're talking about. Very nice. Let's rename this page to long-term habit tracking using a database. Very short and sweet name. That's fantastic. Finally, let's look at what happens here. So, I mean, if we start duplicating these, we continue this and we continue doing more and more habit tracking here, what happens is that this will be quite long-winded, which is a little bit annoying. So what can we do about that? Well, since this is now a real database, we can create new views. Either we can create them standalone, or we can just press the little plus icon here, like I do now. We select what type of view we want to do. I still think the table type is probably the best for a long-term habit tracker, but what we can do is create a weekly view. All right, so show database title. No, we don't really need that. Vertical lines, we can switch those off if we want a cleaner view. Wrap all columns, no thank you. Open pages in side peak, center page, full page, whatever you want. And we say done, okay? Great, so now we have a weekly, and let's rename this so we have all habits. Great. And what we want to do now is firstly we want to recreate this forcing filter. So we say it's not empty, so our date gets populated automatically. That's step 1. And as a second filter, Notion can nowadays actually filter for a date range. So we need to click Add Advanced Filter, where date is, and then we get to choose here is before, is after, is within, is not empty. All right, so we pick is within, and now we get a few nice options here. This week. Great. So we select this week, and we now have one advanced rule and one simple filter. As you can see, it only shows this week. And if I create something, it automatically sets today's date. If I, for some reason, change this to go to next week, it will be removed from the view. Maybe I want to duplicate this to have last week. I can change the icon here, so I set the time. Very nice. I'll set the page to full width since we're starting to use a little bit of space here. And now I have my 3 views. I have my weekly view for this week. Last week, actually, maybe we want to change this. Let's rename this and we say it's monthly. Great. We go into the filter. We change the rule to say within this past month. And now we see all of January here, which is great. We can choose to sort it by date, either ascending or descending. Let's sort it descending, so we have the most recent day on top. We do the same for weekly, and for all habits we do the same as well. We clean it up a little bit by moving this title property out of the way. We move the date property to the beginning. We organize these as they were before. Let's see. Rise, meditate, workout, breakfast, meditate, bed. Great. Habits completed and percent completed. And finally we do the same thing for the weekly one. As a final thing, we'll minimize these columns as well. And we have the weekly view, the monthly view, and the all habits view. Perfect. With all this, we're quite happy with the result. We'll add a little bit of visual flair to this. So we have the header already. We have the nice icon. We'll remove a little bit of white space here. A nice thing we can do with these weekly and monthly views is that we can calculate averages. So if we start clicking here, we see that the averages slowly increase here. They're a little bit slow at updating, but I think it actually works. Great. So when the week is finished, you can, and also along the way, as you add days, you can see how well you're doing in the different aspects. And if you want, you can also see how often you succeeded with each individual habit. Maybe we want to increase the size just a smidge here to make sure that we see those glorious 100% marks. All right, that was all I had for you today. We have our database-driven habit tracker. It will automatically update the first view here to only show dates relevant for this week, but all data back in time is saved in the monthly view for the entire month and in the all habits view where we have every log entry dating back forever. So really convenient and a much easier way to work with than the old long-term habit tracker we created before. I will put a bit more time into this and publish a template for this that I'll link in the description for this video if you want to copy exactly the results we have here. As always, you're completely free to just follow along this and build your own. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Have a very nice day and see you again next time.